Alexander the Great's life began in 356 BCE in the ancient kingdom of Macedon, where he was born to King Philip II and Queen Olympias, two powerful figures whose ambitions shaped his destiny long before he could speak. From childhood, Alexander was told he descended from Achilles on his mother's side and from Heracles on his father's. And whether or not he believed every word, the idea fueled a sense of destiny that set him apart from other boys his age. As a youth, he was tutored by Aristotle, who taught him philosophy, logic, medicine, and the idea that a great leader must understand more than war. He must understand the world he wishes to rule. Even as a teenager, Alexander showed signs of brilliance, famously taming a massive, wild horse named Bucephalus when grown men had failed, and Philip declared that Macedonia was too small for his son, for he must seek a kingdom worthy of him. But Alexander's rise was not peaceful, because Philip II was assassinated in 336 BCE, and at just 20 years old Alexander became king, surrounded by rivals, traitors, and nations eager to test a young ruler. Instead of faltering, he eliminated threats at home, secured loyalty through both force and diplomacy, and then turned his focus to the dream his father had planted, the conquest of Persia. With unmatched speed, he marched south, securing Greece, crushing rebellions, and crossing the Hellespont with a relatively small army that believed their king was touched by the gods. When he reached Troy, he honored Achilles and declared that he too would leave a legacy that echoed through the ages. Alexander's first great test came at the Battle of Granicus in 334 BCE, where his close-range cavalry charge nearly cost him his life, but his courage and tactics shattered the Persian lines and announced that a new force had entered the world stage. He moved through Asia Minor with precision, winning city after city, and in 333 BCE he faced King Darius III at the Battle of East, where the vast Persian army outnumbered him but could not match his speed or strategy. Alexander personally led the charge toward Darius, causing the king to flee and leaving his family in Macedonian hands, and the victory made him a legend across the ancient world. He then turned south to Tyre, a fortified island city that resisted him for 7 months until he built an enormous causeway across the sea and stormed the walls, proving that even nature itself could not stop his ambition. By the time he entered Egypt, he was welcomed not as a conqueror, but as a liberator, crowned pharaoh, and declared the son of Ammon, a title that cemented his divine reputation among his followers. Founded on Egyptian soil, he created the city of Alexandria, which would later become one of the greatest centers of learning and culture in history. But Alexander's true target was still Persia, and in 331 BCE at the Battle of Gaugamela, he faced Darius again in what became one of the most decisive victories in military history. Although Darius fielded war chariots, elite cavalry, and a massive army, Alexander's tactics broke the Persian center, and once more the great king fled, leaving his empire to collapse. Alexander pursued him relentlessly, but before he could reach him, Darius was murdered by his own satraps, and Alexander took the Persian throne as the new king of kings. Now ruler of the largest empire the world had ever seen, Alexander adopted aspects of Persian dress and customs, believing that unifying cultures was essential for stability. But this decision created tension within his ranks. Some saw him as a visionary, embracing a new multicultural empire, while others believed he was abandoning Macedonian tradition. Still, his ambition did not slow. He pushed eastward into Central Asia, taking Bactria, Sogdia, and lands where the geography itself was as deadly as any battlefield. During these campaigns, he married Roxana, a local noblewoman, hoping to unite conquered territories with his own bloodline. And although the marriage caused political strife, it reflected Alexander's long-term strategy of blending cultures into a single empire. In India, Alexander faced enemies unlike any he had seen before, including the massive war elephants of King Porus at the Battle of the Hydaspes in 326 BCE, where rain-soaked ground, charging elephants, and fierce resistance pushed his army to the limit. After a brutal battle, Alexander won, but instead of humiliating Porus, he restored him as a regional ruler, respecting his courage and gaining a loyal ally in return. However, after years of non-stop campaigning, Alexander's army reached the edge of the unknown world and refused to march any farther, forcing him to turn back, a rare moment when even the greatest conqueror had to yield to exhaustion and reality. On the return journey, Alexander was severely wounded multiple times, lost many men crossing the Gedrosian desert, and faced growing tensions within his leadership, leaving him physically weakened yet determined to stabilize his empire. When he finally returned to Babylon in 323 BCE, Alexander began planning new campaigns to Arabia, Carthage, and perhaps even Rome, but fate intervened before any of those visions could become real. At only 32 years old, he fell ill after a banquet, and over the course of several days he slipped toward death, unable to speak clearly, but still commanding his generals by gesture as they passed his bedside. His final reported words, when asked who should inherit his empire, were to the strongest a cryptic answer that threw his world into decades of bloodshed. Alexander's empire fractured among his generals, so Diadoche, creating the Hellenistic kingdoms that spread Greek culture across the Middle East, Egypt, and parts of Asia for centuries. Alexander the Great left behind one of the most extraordinary legacies in human history, a cultural fusion that shaped philosophy, science, architecture, trade, and governance across continents. He founded more than 20 cities, inspired military leaders for thousands of years, and became a symbol of ambition, brilliance, and the cost of limitless conquest. Whether seen as a visionary who united cultures or a conqueror driven by unending glory, his impact is undeniable, and his name remains one of the most powerful in recorded history. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the life of Alexander the Great, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below what historical figure or event you want us to cover next. Your support helps us create more history explained content, and we can't wait to hear what story you want to explore in the next episode.